Executive Director of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. We're back in the studio in New York analyzing what Jared Kushner had to say, wrapping up that live interview where he did divulge some details about the Trump administration's Middle East peace plan. He did acknowledge that this was a very, very difficult problem to solve. So really hedging the bets on that front, though did make sure to point out that he would not like to disappoint the president, who is also his father-in-law. Kushner also stressed that they have studied what has worked and or rather failed in the past, and that this plan is going to offer something completely different, telling people to expect that. We also learned that this plan will propose answers to final status issues. He did say that the plan will not ask Israel to make compromises that will put Israeli security at risk. A big emphasis on improving the lives of the Palestinian people and guaranteeing security for the Israelis. That was certainly a big issue that was pushed during this interview. To his credit, Robert Satloff was trying to pin him down on many specifics. Jared Kushner dodging those, particularly the question of who is going to pay for all of this? That was a question asked, considering that economic incentives seem to be such a crucial part of that plan. Didn't really get much of an answer on that. Another big thing that Kushner stressed was that this plan really recognizes the realities on the ground, that they are trying to be realistic and come up with solutions that will improve the lives of the Palestinian people. The issue of political aspirations being addressed, also something that he wouldn't give a definitive answer on. All right, let's analyze this further with my esteemed panel. Joining us in studio, Shai, Middle East analyst and partner with Gotham Government Relations. Also with us is Brad Hirschfield from CLAL. In Washington, D.C., we have Matthew Brodsky, who is a senior fellow at the Security Studies Group. And from Long Island, New York, we have Yotav Eliach, author of the new book, Judaism, Zionism, and the Land of Israel. Matthew Brodsky, let's start with you in Washington, D.C. What was your main takeaway from this?
You know, my main takeaway is that Jared really didn't seem to answer, as you were pointing out, on the political aspirations of what Palestinians are looking for, which means to me that I wouldn't be surprised if a plan is put forward that doesn't call for a two-state solution, or at least doesn't do so immediately, and is more focused on the economic carrots, something that would improve the daily lives of Palestinians first, to at least set things in the right path toward the parameters that they put down for the final status. So I think that was the main part that stood out for me when you are trying to figure out what exactly is new in what has become a fairly stock speech from either Jared or Jason Greenblatt.
All right, Matthew, to that point of sort of dodging the political aspirations, I do want to play again what he said about a two-state solution and whether the Trump administration was using that term or not. Let's take a listen.
Two-state versus one-state, you can't say two-state. And I realize that means different things to different people. If you say two-state, it means one thing to the Israelis, it means one thing to the Palestinians. So we said, let's just not say it.
Yotav Eliach, what do you make of that comment?
I think in general, I think he attempted to be very rational and to look at everything from a very different perspective. He was very clear. He's coming at it from a business angle. And I think he's sincere, and I think the people with him are very sincere. What I fear is a mistake in terms of what's going to end up happening is there's an assumption here that all the players are rational. Right. I do not believe the PA leadership is rational, and I certainly don't believe the Hamas leadership is rational. Abba Eban said decades ago that the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And so I'm afraid to a great extent that the irrationality of the leadership of both of those factions is not being taken into consideration. Number two, the Palestinian Arabs do not speak in one voice. And that is something that's going to have to be addressed as well. Hamas and Fatah, I think, dislike each other at least as much as they hate the state of Israel. And the fact is that they are not going to agree to the same things on anything. And so there already exists you want to call it whatever you want, whether it's Hamasistan, Gaza, whatever it may be, when you hear Hamas officials speak, they refer to it as a sovereign state. And when you try to tell them it's not a sovereign state, they correct you. So on one hand, I am optimistic in the sense that they're coming at it from a whole new angle. I don't think it's going to be a peace plan. I think it's going to be a series of plans that could be implemented. On the other hand, I'm concerned about so much emphasis being put on rationality. That's not going to be in abundance, in my opinion.
Okay. Brad Hirschfield, I see you nodding in agreement. And Jared Kushner did really emphasize the Palestinian leadership and their lack of wanting to even look at this plan, putting a lot of emphasis on the fact that they've already rejected this without seeing it, and that, in his words, they've completely failed the Palestinian people. What was your main takeaway?
So there are a number of them. This last issue, I think it's important. Typically, United States policy is not done well when it talked past people's elected officials, even when they're lousy at their job, and appealed directly what they assume all people want. That's a very dangerous premise. In fact, the most interesting thing in this, we can come back to the rationality, I agree, that making this a dollar-driven rational plan makes no sense. To be fair, the creation of the State of Israel was not a dollar-driven rational plan. You couldn't have offered David Ben-Gurion and the founding fathers and mothers of the State of Israel enough money to walk away from the Jewish homeland. So we're actually all in this together. To fail to appreciate that the Middle East has never been a dollar-driven, rational place is to miss fundamentally any chance of moving forward. But if you ask me the most important thing he dropped, at one point he said, you know, I think some people there just want the status quo. And I would suggest that actually a lot of people on both sides are trying to position how to maintain the status quo. And I think you got to take that seriously.
I believe that that was in reference to the leaders, saying that the leaders want to maintain the status quo, and that's the challenge. And as you say, it does seem as though this plan is trying to appeal to the Palestinian people, almost bypassing the leadership in many ways, trying to say to them, you can have a better life. Forget about a state for now. At least that was my takeaway. Forget about a state for now. Focus on, as he said, paying your mortgages, having a better life, being able to provide for your family. Maybe that'll work. As they say, this is something that's never been done before, a very unconventional approach. Shai, I saw you shaking your head in disapproval practically every second sentence coming out of Jared Kushner.
My neck hurts, actually.
So I'm just getting the feeling that you did not hear anything that you thought would lead to any kind of success.
No, look, you mentioned the mortgages. I'm pretty sure that the average Palestinian in the West Bank doesn't have a mortgage. Palestinians have their traditional homes. There are people who were in what is today Israel and moved to the West Bank in 1948, so maybe they have some special arrangement. There are many Palestinians still living in refugee camps, not only in the West Bank, but in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria. And we want to improve the lives of the Palestinians by defunding UNRWA, the UN relief organization. We want to improve the lives of the Palestinians by closing the U.S. consulate in Jerusalem. This is even before the plan is issued. We want to give them dignity by moving
they would argue that those are aid initiatives, and this plan, from what we're understanding, is about self-determination in terms of self-economic empowerment.
If it weren't for a couple of other countries stepping in to fill that gap, Palestinian children wouldn't be eating tonight. They wouldn't be going to school tomorrow. So improving the lives of Palestinians, I would suggest that before we take unilateral action.
Thank you so much.
He doesn't want the Israeli, he hopes Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't take any unilateral action before seeing the plan. We've been taking all the unilateral action so far, before the plan. It's not about it. He says he doesn't want to deal with process. But it's all process, it's all trust. Just because we haven't gotten to peace yet doesn't mean everything that was done before is wrong. If there's no trust, they haven't talked, nobody in the U.S. government has spoken to the Palestinian leadership in over a year.
It seems as though the big emphasis is on regional cooperation, that this plan strongly hinges on having cooperation from Egypt, Jordan, and the Saudi Arabians. And that was a point that he mentioned, that the Arab world, to paraphrase, is getting tired of the Palestinian cause. Let's take a listen to that. All right. Basically, Kushner was saying there that the Arab world wants a solution for this cause that is, in fact, draining. Let's try it again. Let's see if we've got that soundbite from Kushner.
in the Arab world, there's a lot of impatience too with the Palestinian issue.
Matthew Brodsky, what do you make of that comment? Because this seems to be the difference in the Trump administration's proposal as opposed to all other proposals, that there has been a shift of sentiment in the Arab world with regards to Israel, the common denominator of the enemy of Iran, bringing Israel and the Saudis closer together. There does seem to be almost an enough with this Palestinian issue, which is many seeing as standing in the way of cooperation and economic development between Israel and its Arab neighbors.
Right. I think this is one of the aspects that's been made really clear in recent years, is that the Israeli-Palestinian issue is not linked to every single thing in the region in the way that has been promoted by many in the peace process complex for decades now. So I think obviously the Arab leaders know that. I think the United States and Jared Kushner have been really concentrating on getting Arab leaders together, that being from Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Egypt, Jordan as well. But they've also been putting pressure on Abbas to try to move the ball forward. As we were discussing earlier, before he even spoke, was the issue of reports that Saudi Arabia was willing to give around $10 billion over 10 years to the Palestinian Authority, to Abbas, something that he reportedly rejected because it would be bad for his political future. He's right when they keep saying, when Kushner keeps saying, or even Greenblatt, that these are calcified talking points that the Palestinians have gathered around and keep repeating. They do nothing for their own future. So I think just to move the ball forward with the Arab states who now realize that there's a better future available and that they can help. That's helpful.
Brad, Kushner did mention some of the unilateral action that the Trump administration has taken, a promise that the president fulfilled that has been made by presidents before, and that is, of course, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And he said that initially it may have been something that makes that process a little bit more complicated, but that in the long run, it is for the betterment of putting forward this deal and making the whole process move ahead. Let's take a listen.
I think that when we recognize Jerusalem, that is a truth. You know, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and that would be part of any final agreement anyway. And I think. Thank you.
Brad?
Look, in the short term, it clearly did a lot of damage. In the long term, could it be helpful? It's hard for me to imagine how.
By recognizing the reality on the ground, that this is off the table. Deal with it.
So here's the thing. If we want clarity of a particular position, that can certainly be helpful. If we're trying to build towards some kind of mutually arrived at deal, not one that's imposed, it's hard for me to see how. See, the issue is not whether it's right or wrong that Jerusalem is the capital. It's whether or not it will advance the cause of peace. If we don't link the two, then 100%, we said the truth, it is the truth, and move on. But to dangle that as a prospective user thing in peacemaking is hard for me to see, and not true to my experience with Palestinians.
Is there any proposal that the Palestinian people would accept anyway, short of Israel from the river to the sea being gone?
So we do actually have, from Palestinian pollsters, Khalil Shikaki and others, we do have a sense of where they are. A two-state solution is probably desired by about 25 to 30% of Palestinians. The largest plurality want a binational state, and about an equal number would like a Palestinian-only state, more akin probably to Gaza, which would be bad for Christians also who are leaving the region. So I don't think there is, and we heard that from one of our other guests, one Palestinian voice here. I think that's why probably they've moved to an economic model, but again, I don't see any history in the Middle East. I don't mean just recently. I don't mean until 1947. I mean going back to the time of Crusaders, back to the time of Abraham, in which a purely economic model ever drove events in that region.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. We will continue to analyze this topic here on I-24 News. Thank you so much, Rabbi Hirschfield, Shai Franklin, Matthew Brodsky, and Yotav Eliach. A lot more still coming up. Keep it right here.